I'm delighted to welcome back Tony Blair, former UK Prime Minister and, of course, now founder of the Institute for Global Change. Mr. Blair, welcome to India Global Forum. It's good to have you back. We heard from you a little earlier. But I want to pick up, first of all, on the slogan, the strapline that you associate with the Institute, which is make globalization work for many, not the few. Just explain what you mean by that.
Thanks very much, Ben. It's great to be with everyone again at the India Global Forum. What I mean by that is very simply that globalization is a force that's pulling the world closer together. It has enormous opportunities associated with it, but you've got to spread those opportunities to the broadest mass of people. And particularly when we are living through an era of technology revolution, then if people don't, for example, have access to the internet, they don't have access to the benefits of technology, then the world becomes even more unequal. So what we try to do from the Institute, and recently we published a paper specifically around what does the world need to do to make sure that the whole of the world gets connected and not just the best in terms of income of the world.
That remain, and what are the challenges to trying to bridge some of those divides?
So essentially, I think you've got to do three things. First of all, you've got to try and make sure that you build the infrastructure of connectivity so that power generation electricity is available to the hundreds of millions of people who presently don't have it. Secondly, you need to make sure that the world is mobilizing the capital. We estimate it's around about $450 billion that's required over a period of time. That sounds a lot of money, but actually just in the context of COVID, it's not that amount, much of an amount of money. And indeed, if you establish that internet connectivity, the payback in terms of increased wealth and income is enormous. And thirdly, you need to create in countries the right regulatory framework so that the private sector is incentivized to come and develop the connectivity that's necessary. But we lay out there a plan to do this, and in the work we do with governments around the world, where we're trying to help them bring the best of technology to their countries to accelerate development, there's a perfectly workable set of plans that could bring about this connectivity if the world got properly mobilized. We're having to get mobilized as a world for COVID. We're having to do the same for climate change. We should do this for internet connectivity.
When you lay it out in such stark terms, and I know you've talked about the digital revolution being compared to the industrial revolution, and history tells us that the industrial revolution was great for Britain, for Germany, for the United States. Who are the biggest benefactors of this technological revolution?
Well, at the moment, it's obviously the wealthy countries in the world, but then China is obviously a center of technology. India itself is a center of technology. I mean, India has got huge internet and technology capabilities at the moment. The sector is due to grow in the next 5 years by roughly 10% a year, but there's still large numbers of people who are left out. So the idea that we put forward is to mobilize the capital, public and private, in order to invest in the technology and the infrastructure necessary to create it, so that those poorest parts of the world get access. And it's not impossible to do, but if you're going to do it, it requires the wealthy countries of the world to cooperate with developing countries in order to do it.
Is digital development a priority right now for many governments? Quite clearly, so many plans have been derailed because of the pandemic. But when we move beyond that, do you really get a feeling that digital adoption and digital investment and innovation is actually at the top of the to-do list for many governments?
I think it's coming to the top of the to-do list. One thing that COVID's taught us is about the importance of technology. Obviously, the acceleration of technology innovation has been an important part of dealing with COVID. Both in terms of vaccines, in terms of testing, and now, of course, in terms of registering those who are vaccinated and data. So a lot of countries that we're working with, and my institute works roughly 25, 30 different countries in the world are moving to things like electronic health records, digital ID, really important, so that you can access government services much more easily. Actually, India has been a leader in this field, and the benefits are enormous. You can make payments more easily, you cut out a lot of corruption, you allow people sort of instant access and therefore power over their own affairs. You can also use the internet for small producer farmers in order to be able to run their businesses more easily. I think technology will transform in the next few years education, healthcare, agriculture, and of course technology is already transforming the energy space. So I don't think there's any doubt at all about it. This technology revolution is the single biggest thing that's happening in the world. And if it's utilized properly, it allows developing countries to leapfrog the systems of the West. So, for example, if you're trying to create a modern healthcare system today, you should be using digitization, you should be using technology so that you're not having to do healthcare in the old way. You can do it much more easily, much more accessibly, and much more cost effectively using technology. So it provides we call our program in the Institute Tech for Development, and I think the opportunities are absolutely enormous, but it means that governments have also got to reconfigure the way they work. They need a different skill set, different types of people coming in and working in government, and they need close connection, obviously, with those firms that are able to help them in the technology space.
You raised healthcare, and we've been talking about this throughout the day, about how technology can change not only the administration of healthcare, but the delivery of it too. And that's before we even get into things like AI, which could change treatment. I wonder, though, whether enough has been done to address the nervousness, the reluctance, the maybe reticence that many will still have about handing over so much data to big tech corporations, given that we've seen when in the wrong hands, it can be pretty disastrous.
Yeah, but Ben, I really think this is much more of a concern of a certain fairly limited group of people than it is a real person's concern. I mean, of course, there's all sorts of ways you can protect the privacy of your health records, and your health records, by the way, are vulnerable even if they're in written form rather than stored, for example, in the cloud. In fact, they can often be much more secure when it's done digitally. But the benefit that you have, for example, of a doctor seeing you, being able immediately to bring up your patient history so that they can treat you better, the advantages you've got, for example, in having specialists who can do consultations remotely, these are huge advantages. And of course, you've got to take seriously the privacy concerns, but there are ways of dealing with that. And the advantages of moving to digital ID and digital patients' records, the advantages, in my view, far